The blade pierced Caesar's body like a silent sentence. Betrayed by his own allies, stabbed 23 times, the most powerful man in Rome fell alone on the cold floor of the Senate. An entire empire held its breath. The world changed at that moment, but no one knew yet how profoundly. While the blood flowed, the future was rewritten. And among all the conspirators who toasted the tyrant's death, none suspected that Caesar had left an heir, not legitimate, but chosen. His name was Gaius Octavian. Studying in Apollonia in the northern Balkans, the young man received the news with shock and outrage. But instead of fleeing, as advised, he decided to sail toward the storm. The revenge of a betrayed empire was about to begin, and it would be written with iron, fire, and bodies. Octavian landed on the Italian coast as an unknown, but he had in his hands the will that would change his life and the destiny of Rome. Caesar had left him 2/3 of his possessions and something even more dangerous, the right to carry his name. From that moment on, Gaius Octavian was called Gaius Julius Caesar Octavian. But Rome was not a city that was earned by inheritance. It was necessary to take it. Without political prestige, without enough money, and surrounded by enemies, Octavian began to act boldly. He took funds that Caesar had left for campaigns in the East. It brought together faithful veterans, and he presented himself to the soldiers as the legitimate successor of the dead dictator. Before long, he had 3,000 men under his command, marching through Italy with a dangerous idea: to avenge Caesar and take your place. If this part of the story has hooked you, imagine what's yet to come. The stranger who stepped off a ship would become the most powerful man in history, but the path there was marred by betrayals, battles, and cruel decisions. If you love true stories that surpass any fiction, leave your like now. It shows that you value epic content like in this, and subscribe to the channel, because what lies ahead will change the way you see Rome and power. With each new video, you'll dive deeper behind the scenes of the world's most legendary empire. This channel is for those who are not satisfied with the summarized version of history. So come with us and help this content reach those who also deserve to find out what really happened behind the scenes of the Roman Empire. On May 6th, 44th BC, Octavian arrived in Rome. There, he met Mark Antony, Caesar's former ally, in a strange truce with the dictator's assassins, an uncomfortable alliance forged in fear. Antony spoke at Caesar's funeral, inflaming the people, but behind the scenes, he allowed the assassins to escape. It was the first sign that Octavian could not trust anyone. The city was divided. The Senate tried to maintain order, but it had no army. Mark Antony, on the other hand, amassed power and influence, but his political game was volatile, and Octavian was underestimated by everyone. In silence, he bought loyalties. He conquered 2 entire legions of Antony with promises in gold. And when Antony tried to take the province of Cisalpine Gaul by force, already controlled by Brutus, the Senate saw its chance. It would use Octavian as a political weapon against its rival. The Senate, cornered and without military strength, saw in Octavian an unexpected exit. Cicero, Rome's greatest orator, used his prestige to exalt Caesar's young heir, calling him the ultimate example of pietas, the virtue of loyalty to one's country and family. It was a political move, but Octavian knew how to take advantage of it masterfully. On January 1st, 43 BC, he was officially appointed a senator, and more importantly, he was given the empire proper, the legal right to command troops. Octavian, still 19 years old, was sent to liberate the city of Mutina, besieged by Mark Antony. Marching alongside the consuls Hirtius and Pansa, Octavian faced his first major campaign. Both consuls died in combat, but Octavian survived and won. In April of that year, he emerged victorious in the battles of Forum of the Roosters and Mutina, forcing Mark Antony to flee. For the first time, Rome saw him not only as an heir, but like a true commander. Despite the victories at Mutina, the Senate made a fatal mistake. It minimized Octavian's role and exalted Brutus, one of Caesar's assassins. It was like spitting in the face of those who had saved Rome from Antony. Feeling betrayed and devalued, Octavian exchanged respect for resentment, and Rome still did not know what he was capable of doing when he felt dishonored. He refused to continue obeying the Senate's orders. He settled in the Po Valley, far from Rome, and began to act on his own. He sent an embassy of centurions, demanding the consulship left vacant by the dead consuls. He also demanded the annulment of the decree that had made Mark Antony an enemy of the state. The Senate refused. Then Octavian did the unthinkable. He marched against Rome with 8 legions. He met no resistance. On August 19th, 43 BC, he was elected consul, the highest office in the Republic. It was official. The boy had taken Rome, with the weight of Caesar in his name. The young consul no longer had political rivals, only armed enemies, and he knew he couldn't face them alone. Therefore, in a move that no one expected, Octavian sought out the 2 men he hated the most, Mark Antony and Lepidus. United by Caesar's memory and desire for vengeance, they formed the Second Triumvirate, an alliance of 3 men with absolute power. Unlike the First Triumvirate, this one was legalized by the Senate and approved by the plebs. For 5 years, the 3 would have total control over Rome, above any law. The first action, bloody and merciless, the proscriptions. More than 300 senators and 2,000 citizens have been declared enemies of the state. Their assets were confiscated, their heads put on a price. No one was safe. Not even Cicero, Octavian's greatest defender, was spared. When his head was handed over, Octavian showed no emotion. For the first time, Rome realized that he was not only Caesar's heir, it was the continuation of his shadow. In October 42nd BC, the fate of the Republic was concentrated in a single city, Philippi, in Macedonia. It was here that Octavian and Mark Antony sent 28 legions to confront Caesar's assassins, Brutus and Cassius, who had formed a powerful military base in Greece. It was more than a battle. It was a reckoning between past and future. Brutus and Cassius held advantageous positions on hills to the west of the city, relying on their naval superiority. But Antony wasted no time. He skirted the swamps and launched a surprise attack. Cassius, thinking all was lost, committed suicide before learning that Brutus had won on the other side. 3 weeks later, Brutus found himself cornered. He tried maneuvers, avoided direct combat, but he was forced to fight. Octavian's and Antony's forces broke through their central lines, attacking from the flanks. By nightfall, the Republican army had collapsed. Brutus, surrounded in the hills, preferred death to capture. And so, with his suicide, the last hope of the old Republic also died. With Brutus and Cassius dead, the triumvirs were at the height of power. They divided Rome as if it were a personal empire. Octavian got the west, Mark Antony the east, and Lepidus, the weakest, Africa. But peace was an illusion. The Roman people themselves would soon taste the bitter taste of this victory. To please the veterans, Octavian confiscated land from ordinary citizens and evicted entire families from their homes. The result? Revolts, indignation, and new enemies. Fulvia, Antony's wife, and Lucius Antony, Antony's brother, organized an army in Italy to challenge Octavian. Initially, they won victories, but their soldiers were unmotivated, without resources and poorly paid. Octavian laid siege to Perusia during a brutal winter. The city fell, Fulvia was exiled, and Octavian, on March 15th, the anniversary of Caesar's death, executed 300 senators and knights who supported the revolt. It was a clear message. Whoever dared to challenge him would pay in blood. Caesar's heir was now far more feared than the dead dictator himself. The alliance between Octavian and Mark Antony was maintained only by appearances and by Octavian's sister, Octavia, who was married to Antony. But everything fell apart when the general decided to abandon his Roman wife and live publicly with Cleopatra, Queen of Egypt. Alongside her, he had children and distributed kingdoms and titles as if he were emperor of an Eastern empire. Octavian, a master of propaganda, saw in this the perfect opportunity. When two of Antony's allies defected, they handed him a precious document, Mark Antony's secret will. The content was explosive. Antony left an inheritance to his children with Cleopatra and wished to be buried next to her in Egypt. For many Romans, this was a betrayal of the homeland. Octavian took the will to the Senate and turned the scandal into war. But he did not declare war on Mark Antony, but on Cleopatra, the foreigner, the enemy of the Republic. It was a genius move. Public opinion turned in his favor. Antonio, now portrayed as a traitor, lost support even in the Senate. The stage was set for the final showdown, and only one of them would come out alive. In 31 BC, the forces of Octavian and Mark Antony met at Actium, Greece. It was the largest naval battle in Roman history. Octavian, with the strategic support of Agrippa, commanded a lighter, faster and more trained fleet. Mark Antony and Cleopatra, on the other hand, brought larger, heavy ships and inexperienced sailors. It was a massacre. Antonio's fleet collapsed. Cleopatra fled with her ships. Antonio followed. The defeat was humiliating. Shortly thereafter, in Alexandria, cornered and without allies, Mark Antony fell on his own sword. Cleopatra, captured, refused to live under the chains of a triumphal parade. He committed suicide with the venom of a snake. Octavian, now absolute lord of the Roman world, returned to Rome carrying Egypt as a trophy. But he did not proclaim himself king. He didn't have to. With political skill, he rejected power, only for the Senate to offer it back. In 27 BC, he was given a new title, Augustus, and with that, the Roman Empire was born. The Republic was dead, but in its place, something even greater emerged and longer lasting. You've just heard the story of a young man with no titles, no wealth and no support, who decided not to run away from the chaos, but to face it head on and transform his destiny with courage. If this inspired you, if something inside you awakened listening to this journey of overcoming, then now it's your turn to act. This content was made with hours of research, writing, and passion for history to deliver you something of real value. If this touched you, leave your like as a form of retribution. It's simple yet powerful. And subscribe to the channel now, because each video here is a new opportunity for transformation. Not only to understand the past, but to see the strength that exists within those who decide to change their own destiny.